Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome our stakeholders tuning into this audio webcast and those who are here in Washington observing our meeting in person. Before we begin with the business of our meeting, I'd like to note that the FAF recently released its annual report, Standards that Work, Stakeholder Engagement. The report provides an overview of the organization's activities throughout 2024. You can access the web-based version of the report on our homepage, accountingfoundation.org, and find a downloaded PDF of the full document. Turning to today's meeting, we'll hear reports from the FASB Chair, the GASB Chair, the FAF Executive Director, and the FAF Treasurer. We'll also receive reports about the latest activities of the Private Company Council, the Government Accounting Standards Advisory Council, and the Trustees Standard Setting Process Oversight Committee. Before we get to those reports, I'd like to take a moment to recognize Dr. Brian Caputo, who will complete his second term as a GASB board member on June 30th, 2025. Brian joined the GASB on July 1st, 2015, and was reappointed by the FAF trustees in 2019 to a second term. He brought to the GASB more than 30 years of experience in the Illinois government and public higher education and in varied positions, using both his practical and theoretical expertise in governmental financial reporting. Brian has left a lasting imprint on the GASB. His leadership and insight will be missed. We thank Brian for his dedicated service and thoughtful contributions to the GASB and wish him the best in the years ahead. Now I'd like to acknowledge the appointment of a new FASAC Chair, Dave Sullivan, and say thank you to our current Chair, Mike Morrow, for his committed service to the role. Dave retired from Deloitte in 2021 after having been with the company for over 35 years, where he held multiple roles. Throughout his time with Deloitte, he was a lead client and advisory partner in the areas of technology, software, retail, manufacturing, and automotive, holding positions in regional, national, and global leadership. Dave currently serves as a member of the Public Interest Oversight Board, which oversees the auditing and assurance, ethics, and education standard setting activities of the International Federation of Accountants. He also serves on the audit quality advisory boards of RSM and CBIZ CPAs. Dave is a skilled advisor guiding national and multinational organizations through downturns, growth, and investment cycles. He has extensive experience working with large public companies, as well as emerging growth companies and those preparing for an initial public offering. His two-year term will begin January 1st, 2026, when he would be eligible for reappointment. I'm afraid my notes don't quite work there. Apologies for that, but it begins January 1st, 2026. As we welcome Dave to his role, let me say a very heartfelt thank you to Mike Morrow for his incredibly engaged level of leadership to the FASAC, and acknowledge the investment of time he willingly gave over the past 7 years, 6 as the FASAC Chair, and an additional year as an advisory member of that council. I have one last announcement. The Board of Trustees has begun a search for a new member of the GASB and issued a call for nominations this week. Candidates for consideration can find more information about the application and appointment process on our website at accountingfoundation.org. With that, let's move on to our regular agenda. The first item of business is to approve the minutes from the board's February 25th meeting. May I have a motion, please? Second? All in favor? Aye. Thank you. We'll now move to reports from FASB, GASB, PCC, and GASAC. So I'll turn first to FASB Chair Rich Jones.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Good afternoon, everyone. Please find a copy of the first quarter chair report in your materials. And I wanted to spend a few minutes to update you on our 2025 activities. During the first quarter, the FASB issued a final standard related to clarifying the effective date of our disaggregation income statement expense standard, particularly as it relates to entities with non-calendar year ends, as well as an exposure draft related to codification improvements. Subsequent to the end of the first quarter, up through the date of today's meeting, we have also issued an exposure draft related to accounting for debt exchanges, In addition, the board has completed initial deliberation and expects to issue an exposure draft later this year on our project on accounting for paid in-kind dividends on preferred stock. The board also recently issued final standards on share-based consideration payable to a customer, determining the acquirer and the acquisition of a VIE. In addition, the board has completed redeliberations, and the board expects to issue a final ASUs later this year on our projects on credit losses for trade AR, a project that originated with our private company counsel, hedge accounting improvements, derivative scope refinements, and the accounting for purchased financial assets. When you look at our technical agenda today, an agenda that benefits from being comprehensively reset as part of our last agenda outreach efforts, you will notice there are 12 projects on our technical agenda. Five have been voted to proceed to final standards. 4 are in redeliberations. 1 is an exposure draft that is out for comment, and 1 is an exposure draft expected to be issued later this year. Assuming those projects continue to progress, it is reasonable to assume that we will complete substantially all of the projects on our technical agenda by or about the end of this year. We continue to perform outreach with our stakeholders as we consider adding new topics to our agenda. We're continuing to use our research agenda to gather additional input for the board as it relates to future projects. The newly reconstituted EITF and the PCC, as well as our normal receipt of agenda requests, will also continue to provide our board items to consider for our future technical agenda. In addition, as we previously discussed in early 2025, we issued an invitation to comment related to agenda outreach. We look forward to hearing the input from our stakeholders as the year progresses and factoring that into resetting our agenda once again. So on behalf of my colleagues on the board, I want to thank you for your support and our fulfilling our mission, and I look forward to taking any questions. Ed?
No questions for Rich.
So I have a question. So on the Rich, on the FASB's agenda consultation, could you describe what steps you're taking to make sure that you get input from a broad array of stakeholders?
Sure. And Paul, probably started with how we prepared that document, that invitation to comment. We did outreach with over 200 stakeholders, over a third of which were investors, and really asked them a simple question: what should be the FASB's priority when it comes to standard setting? We took that information on an unfiltered basis. We accumulated it into an invitation to comment, and we've issued it for public comment. And we have a fairly extensive comment period. We have a 6-month comment period. One thing, though, that we do recognize is not all of our stakeholders write comment letters. Particularly when it comes to our investor stakeholder group, we tend to benefit more with direct outreach. In other words, not in accounting speak, but in the results of accounting standards, what it'll look like in financial reporting. So we're continuing to do that, whether it's with targeted groups, with our advisory councils, different advisory councils, including our investor advisory council. And I would extend that as an open invitation to anyone. While we certainly love to get comment letters, we certainly recognize that others would prefer to give us input in different manners, and we're eager to meet with them, and we're constantly looking for new people.
Other questions? Luis?
Thank you. Just Rich, noted recently that the Small Business Advisory Council has been renamed as the Public Markets Advisory Committee. Can you give some insights into why that occurred and what impact that may or may not have on stakeholders?
Sure. Thanks, Luis. A great question. We did rename it, and part of the reason was the word small. And the whole objective of that council was to make sure that we were getting input from a subset of public companies and understanding their unique challenges and opportunities, as well as their investors in dealing with the public markets. But by using the term small in that, we realized that we were excluding many companies that were considering going public or had just recently gone public because of their market cap solely. It didn't necessarily mean that their operations were that different. So we've renamed it the Public Markets Advisory Committee. We still have a focus on small public companies, but we have the added focus on companies that either are considering going public or recently went public. We find they share a lot of the same concerns and issues, and we thought that was a better way to attract people to that group and get input.
Thanks. Anything else for Rich?
Thanks, Ed. Rich, real quick. Sorry about that. Real quick, the technical agenda or request, two things are great about that. One, it shows that you guys are really getting stuff done. So you're opening up room. And then the other part that's exciting is there could be some new projects. Assuming you're going to get a ton of requests for adding to your agenda, how do you guys prioritize what you're going to work on?
Sure. One thing is any agenda request or any of the input we get as part of our agenda outreach, the ITC process, we bring back in front of our entire board, because to add a project to our technical agenda, that's a majority board decision. And in that, each member considers prioritization. Well, we get a recommendation and an analysis from the staff, and that'll include a recommendation on whether or not they think we should add it to our agenda. Each of the board members looks at those factors and makes their own judgment. I will tell you that I think you'll hear us. While we make an individual evaluation, we're all looking to understand prevalence. We're all looking to understand what's occurring today. Are we reducing diversity? Are we making the standards easier to apply and get a more precise answer? Consider all of those things. Which stakeholder group is it benefiting and how? That goes into that analysis. So I would say at the end of the day, it's probably a bit more of an art, but it's considering those factors and making sure that we have the ability to not only add it to our agenda, but an ability to execute and complete a project appropriately.
I have another
Go ahead,
question.
Margie.
Rich, I wanted to follow up on the question that Trustee Quincy asked you about the agenda consultation and the support from a broad array of stakeholders. So with regards to that project, are you able to share with us if you are noticing any themes that are emerging from what you have heard so far?
Yeah, and to be fair, we've gotten some comment letter responses back. I've looked at some, I haven't looked at all. And we're going to continue to get those through June. In fact, we'll get a few that struggle in after that. So, but I can tell you that in the outreach that went to building that document, that was the 200 and some stakeholders, there was a couple things that struck me. There were some topics on there where there was really a question about application of existing standards. It could be hedge accounting, and was the model too complex? Was it achieving the economics it was intended to? Or liabilities and equity? Is the guidance pieced together, and is it really giving the right answers, or there are challenges in application? But the theme that struck me probably the most was how many different areas different stakeholders raised there. And that's partially, I think, because we have a very well-developed set of standards and people are looking at their own experiences and saying, hey, this is an area I'm focused on. So it was pretty widely dispersed. The other thing that I will tell you versus when we did the outreach back in 21-22, was when we did a lot of the investor outreach. Then there were certain specific projects they were very focused on. This time around, we heard a lot of you did what I asked you to do. Didn't mean they didn't have more, some of them, but there was definitely a recognition that things like our disaggregation income statement expenses, our segment standard, providing a more economic accounting for digital assets, that was certainly widely embraced by those stakeholders.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anything else for Rich? If not, Jerry, I think maybe we'll go next to you for the private company council. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Ed. Thanks for letting me be here again. Last year when I talked to you guys, I knew absolutely nothing because I just started my term and I'd had one meeting. So whatever I said then, I stand behind, but I don't remember what it was. So thank you for the opportunity to be the chair of the Private Company Council. And on behalf of my colleagues, I think we've had a pretty great year. In the summer, we evaluated 10 or 12 different things that we might add to our agenda. And based on research the staff did, we actually added 4 of those and we've been working on them. 1 or 2 of them have sort of come to a conclusion now, as we talk about in the materials that's included in the document at page 98. But a couple of things that we've done that maybe aren't so highlighted is since the meeting a year ago with you guys, the FAF completed its evaluation of the Private Company Council. And fortunately, it was found by the stakeholders and users that were involved to be highly effective over its time and did not require fundamental changes in how we operate. But there was a clear indication that we have not been as good at communicating what we've been doing as perhaps we could have. And so part of that process is we issued the first ever, or as Tim Christian said, the best ever annual report for the Private Company Council. And the FASB staff did a marvelous job with that not being dense, but having graphs and charts and things that I think are understandable. And it's laid out a roadmap for how we can look at things on an ongoing basis. So we're very pleased about how that fit in with what the FAF found. Over the last year, we've had meetings with over 1,000 stakeholders, whether virtually or in person, some one-on-one focus meetings with interested user or preparer groups has been a part of that. We've had high engagement with the AICPA, which is a big part of our constituency. I want to really call out Jennifer Weiss and Sue Cosper for how easy they've made my job relative to this. But as you guys know, Jack and Holly Nebler have also, been huge contributors in how the staff come to bear in getting things done. We added a new preparer member on January 1, Autumn Heineman from a small market sort of private company. We're in the hunt now for I'll say a bigger but not great big preparer from a private company for replace Holly Nelson when her second term ends in December. And so that process has started, and we look forward to recommendations that this group or anyone listening might have to help us move along. It's been as I quote my 4-year-old son, that this has been a lot better than I thought it was going to be. And so thank you for letting me be here.
Any questions for Jerry or his son?
I don't have a question, but not a question, Ed, but maybe just a comment for my old partner, Jerry. I want to congratulate you on covering the over and hitting your 1-year anniversary. So those bets have paid off. And I do want to send the PCC report, Jerry. I think many of us found it not surprising, the importance and effectiveness of the group. And I really don't have a question. I want to compliment you on what I think has been a high level of effectiveness to date. And I'm excited for what the future will bring with the energy that you and Sue and many others are bringing to the PCC. So thank you for that.
You're here. Totally agree. Any questions for Jerry? Or comments, additional comments? If not, Joel, we'll turn to you for the GASB report.
Thanks, Ed. Good afternoon. Great to be with you and always happy to give an update on what we have going on at the GASB. Remembering back to the fourth quarter, we issued 3 documents for public comment. One was a preliminary views document on our infrastructure assets project. Another was an exposure draft of the subsequent events potential standard, and also an exposure draft of the implementation guide update. So during the first quarter, all the comment periods for those documents came to an end. We got a lot of good feedback, which we went over in more detail with the Oversight Committee last Friday. And the board is moving all of the input we received into redeliberation to go and continue on with those 3 projects. During the first quarter, we also issued another document for public comment, a preliminary views document on severe financial stress and probable dissolution disclosures. That comment period ends June 30th. So 4 documents out for public comment is a lot for us in a relatively short period of time, but we actually only have 5 standard setting projects on our agenda. So we just had, they just all hit that point at a specific time. At the GASB, we continue to be very appreciative that our stakeholders are challenged for resources in their finance departments, and we continue to have a very high bar set for us to undertake a project. We think the project needs to be or have the potential to have a substantial improvement in the government financial report. We think those 5 projects all meet that bar and look forward to them continuing. We also focus on other ways that we can help our stakeholders, whether it be simplification within our standard setting projects or within our standards, and working with our stakeholders to make financial reporting more effective, including encouraging, facilitating when we can the use of technology and using materiality. Also want to highlight that our voluntary digital financial reporting project does continue, remembering that's our taxonomy project, the objective of which is a technology solution agnostic data structure for governments who want to report their financial information in a more digitized and modern way. Finally, the board continues to place a high degree of emphasis on the projects that our advisory council, the GASAC, prioritizes for us. They went through their annual prioritization in April, and I don't want to spoil Rob's report in a minute, so I will leave it to him, but the board is focused on the highest priority projects for our GASAC. So that concludes my report, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Joel. Any questions for Joel?
I have a question, Joe. GASB recently issued your report entitled Which Governments Utilize GAAP? Were there any findings in this study that were unexpected by you or your fellow board members? Can you provide a little bit more details on that?
Sure. It was a interesting report. It was a study that had been a long time since we'd done it. I think that overall, we probably found roughly what we expected, that 100% of states use GAAP. Our estimation was that 74% of counties use GAAP, 71% of cities and towns. I think that's relatively consistent with a prior study done in 2008. It was done in a much different way, so it's hard to compare, but it's actually a little bit higher percentage than what that study showed, although relatively consistent. So I think it's relatively what we expected to find, but we were interested to know, right? Has it changed a lot? There's been a lot of pressure on governments, as we've talked about with the resources, so we wanted to set a baseline and see where we were.
Well, on behalf of the board, I want to compliment GASB and its staff for undertaking this project and completing it. And I understand that it's now been embedded into your periodic update, schedules. So that would be very helpful to have this trend. Hopefully it will keep improving, but we'll get to see the numbers, hopefully every year, if not, periodically. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Beth?
First, I'd like to echo Manju's comments about the report. It's excellent. The database, just getting to where do you find the information on governments? It's there's no central place, so you did a great job, and I look forward to the periodic updates as well. I'd like to talk about the Financial Data Transparency Act. The phase one joint rule was proposed in August of last year, but has not moved forward at this point with much attention going on in Washington at the moment. Is whether the FDTA moves forward and when imperative to the GASB's taxonomy and the work that you're doing there. If you could share some insights on that.
Sure. Thanks, Beth. Short answer is no, it isn't. We undertook our taxonomy project because we thought it was important to maintain the relevance of GAAP in a future way in which financial information is consumed. So irregardless of what the SEC or joint agencies decide, we will continue on with our project. Certainly, if they decide to include the annual financial report and make it machine readable, we hope to be able to work with them and we continue to update them. But whether or not they proceed, we continue to proceed and will with our project.
Thank you.
Thanks, Beth.
Other questions for Joel? Rick?
Thanks, Ed. Say, Joel, as a practitioner, I'm applaud GASB's emphasizing the local governments, the consideration of materiality and implementing standards. How do you get the word out to local governments that is an option for them? Sure, Rick. It is number one, something we do in our GASB updates. We try to encourage and remind people that they can use it. But I think that prepare organizations, because this is really about preparers using materiality more, because in governments, they tend not to want to, because they're good stewards of public funds, every dollar counts, all that stuff. So they don't want to use materiality, but it makes their process and their cost of compliance higher, then it maybe has to be. And so I think prepare organizations are really the place that probably should come from. And so the GFOA in particular has recently taken up this initiative. We're working with them and dialoguing with them about our views and willing to help them in any way, but they seem to be moving forward with trying to create what they'll call something like a permission structure to help educate government finance officials how to use what materiality is, how they might could use it, and some general guidelines and parameters to help them with those, tough decisions at times.
Anything else for Joel? If not, Rob, you're up for GASAC.
Thank you, Ed, and good afternoon, everyone. So the materials that for the write-up that I put together is on page 118 of your packet, and I just wanted to provide a couple of highlights from our March meeting that occurred on the 17th and 18th. First off, this was the first meeting for our 3 new constituency organizations: the Airports Council International of North America, the National Association of Black Accountants, and the National Association of State Boards of Accountancy. This brings our overall constituency organizations to 33 on the GASAC. In addition to those 3 new members, we had 7 new members that also joined the council. So 10 new members overall. There was a new member orientation meeting the first morning of our council meeting. A lot of great engagement, and those new members quickly joined into the conversation, shared their perspectives eagerly, continue to have very robust conversations around the different topics that we had. So really pleased with the high level of engagement that we had amongst our members. Chair Black, as he shared a little bit earlier, had included in an update to us about the high bar that the GASB has set before adding something to a technical agenda, and the GASAC members have been very supportive of this, recognizing that the resource constraints are very real amongst our organization. So appreciative of the GASB's, again, efforts around this. Some of the topics that we had included, again, they're in the materials, but I wanted to include a couple of highlights. The annual prioritization exercise that Joel alluded to. Our top 6 items in order were cybersecurity risk disclosures, the financial reporting entity, revenue and expense recognition note disclosures, gap structure, deferred inflows and outflows, and fund balance. One of the things that had come out of our discussion, because cybersecurity risk disclosures was also a topic on our agenda, was some of our members had confused what the prioritization exercise was, not understanding that we were wanting to elevate those to a potential project for the GASB. So that was a great opportunity for education for our members to understand what the real objective of that prioritization exercise was. Because as we unpacked that topic, there was a lot of, quite frankly, a lot of support for not moving forward the project on that particular topic, just given the risk around cybersecurity risk disclosures and who might be reading those types of things in our financial report. The other thing that I think has been really beneficial of the smaller agenda is we were able to get an update on the post-implementation review of GASB statement number 75, which is one that deals with other post-employment benefits, getting a chance to see the progress so far, the initial feedback and results, and again, got an opportunity to share our perspective on the progress so far. And then one of our items that we always include in our meeting agenda is an emerging issues conversation. And a couple of highlights from there were revenue recognition related to tax credits that are available to governments for the clean energy initiatives under the Inflation Reduction Act. Some interest on that topic, along with revenue recognition implications when the federal grant reimbursements do not occur timely. Digital assets, precious metals. We're seeing some governments using precious metals perhaps as a medium to for payment or receipt of amounts, and then some concerns around lack of qualified individuals to prepare financial statements and possible solutions that might be available. And then, as Joel talked a little bit earlier about the voluntary financial reporting project, there was a presentation that occurred during our March meeting. Members were very appreciative of the GASB taking a leadership role in this effort, recognizing that the GASB really is in a unique position to do so, and again, very, very appreciative and applaud that effort. We did have an executive committee the day before our meeting, and one of the topics that we had talked about was emphasizing the importance of in-person attendance. We have a meeting 3 times a year, and wanting to underscore, as individuals take up the opportunity to be a member of the GASAC, that how important it is for them to attend in person, and encouraging that they make time for those priorities with our meetings. And then last but not least, we have Our next meeting will occur on Wednesday, July 30th in Norwalk, Connecticut. There will be a public forum for one of the projects that Joel talked about on Tuesday, July 29th for a public forum. And hopefully a lot of our GASAC members will take that opportunity to participate in that public forum. And then I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to serve and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Rob. Any questions for Rob? Seeing none, our next report is from our Oversight Committee, and I think Manju is going to handle that today.
Good afternoon. The Standard Setting Process Oversight Committee met virtually on Friday, May 16th. We received informational reports from FASB Chair Rich Jones and GASB Chair Joel Black. And as we do at each meeting, we also discussed meeting and observations from trustees who covered several meetings in this past quarter. Various trustees covered 4 different meetings in this past quarter. To begin with, trustees Rick Reisig, Luis Aguilar, and FASB liaison to the PCC, Sue Cosper. They shared their observations at the PCC meeting that took place on March 6th. Second, we heard from trustees Beth Pierce and Lynette Kelly on their observations of the GASAC meeting, which took place March 17th and 18th. And again, from trustee Pierce on her observations of the GASB meeting that took place March 18th and 19th. And finally, from trustee Pratt on his observation of the FASB meeting that took place on March 26th. The committee and its participants held engaging and valuable discussions on several important topics. For any stakeholders interested in viewing a recording of yesterday's public session, on May 16th public session, you can find this on the FAF website. With regards to the report received from GASB Chair Joel Black and Director Alan Skelton reviewed the main highlights of the past quarter. Many of these matters have already been covered in GASB Chair Black's report during this session, so I won't go into all that. Primary topics included, reviewed by the committee included an educational session on GASB and GASB's use of the exposure draft process and how it manages that draft process to solicit and obtain information. In addition, GASB spent time summarizing its recently released report on which governments utilize GAAP. Again, I want to give a shout out to the GASB team on doing a wonderful job on that report. Moving on with the FASB update with regards to the report received from FASB Chair Rich Jones and Deputy Technical Director Nellie Debler. We discussed the FASB's progress in the last quarter. Again, many of these matters have already been covered by Rich Jones during his report earlier. So I won't go into it. The other topics reviewed by the committee included an update on the progress made on the FASB standard setting top priorities and per its July 22 agenda consultation, and due diligence process summaries of the disaggregation income statement expenses and codification improvements projects. With that, I conclude my report and turn it back to Ed.
Thank you, Manju. Any questions for Manju? Seeing none, John, FAF Executive Director.
Yes, thank you, Ed. Well, last evening, we were honored to host many of our stakeholders at a reception here in Washington. And I want to take a moment to thank everyone who attended and engaged with us. Our chair mentioned the recent appointment of Dave Sullivan to chair the Financial Accounting Standards Advisory Council. I'd just like to briefly recap the other appointments matters that our hardworking appointments committee of the FAF Board of Trustees are currently conducting. There is a search for the vacancy to be left by our departing FAF Chair, Ed Bernard, whose term will conclude on December 31st of 2025. We are searching for vacancies to be left by 5 departing FAF trustees: Tim Kristen, Lynette Kelly, Rick Reisig, Sarah Smith, and Robin Washington, whose terms will also all conclude on December 31st, 2025. We are engaged in a search for a FASB member to replace Christine Badasan, whose second term will conclude on June 30th of 2026, and engaged in consideration of the reappointment of FASB member Fred Cannon to a second term, as his first term will also end on June 30th, 2026. As Ed mentioned, we recently issued a call for nominations for a new GASB member. That would be to replace GASB member and Vice Chair Jeff Praviti, whose second and final term will conclude on June 30th of 2026. And a consideration of the reappointment of GASB member Jacqueline Reck to a second term, since her first term will also end on June 30th, 2026. As Jerry Shower mentioned, we are engaged in a search for a PCC member to replace Holly Nelson, whose term on the PCC is going to conclude at the end of this year on December 31st. And finally, the Appointments Committee is leading a search for my successor. As noted previously, my retirement as the Executive Director of the FAF will be effective on September 30th, although I have agreed to stay on through the end of the year to assist my successor with the transition. We hope to be able to announce appointments for all these searches before the end of this calendar year. Lastly, Ed mentioned that we recently posted our annual report for 2024. I'd just like also to remind stakeholders that on the FAF's website, you can find information about our finances under the tab, under a tab relating to finances. So that includes our budget and our 2024 financial statements. And unless there are any questions, I will turn things back to you, Ed.
Any questions for John? Great, thanks. Our last report is from our treasurer on our financials, Manju.
Thank you, Ed. It's my privilege to provide a high-level summary of financial results for the first quarter ending March 31st, 2025. The details are located on page 121, and as you will note, they show a strong and favorable condition compared to the budget. Net assets increased approximately 38 million, primarily related to recognition of the full year of FASB and GASB accounting support fees in the first quarter, and those support fees totaled 60 million. This resulted in a 2.1 million favorable variance against budget, with the following contributing factors. Operating expenses were about 1 million below budget due to savings for salaries and benefits from several FASB and GASB vacancies, as well as savings and timing differences for travel, depreciation, and other costs. Reserve fund investment income was nearly 1 million favorable against budget, as overall return for the quarter exceeded the budgeted amount. Headcount is 4 below budget, including 2 technical positions, each for FASB and GASB. And that's my high-level summary. Thank you.
Thanks, Manju. Any questions for Manju? If not, this is, the end of the public session of today's FAF Board of Trustees meeting. Thanks again to those of you who tuned into the webcast and those who observed the meeting here in person. Let me remind everyone that the next FAF Board of Trustees meeting will be held virtually on Tuesday, August 19th. Thanks very much and have a great day.